Hey, I've got a long trip, so I thought I'd do some talking. Uh, I was supposed to do my tongue twisters today, but I got called out to do something else instead. So the tongue twisters will probably be in a video or two. Depends on how I'm feeling tomorrow. But I've got a 40-minute drive, so I decided to make some content. So let's do some talking points for our improv for D&D stuff. Well, I guess it's not strictly speaking D&D stuff. The sun changed about 4 years ago. Of course, everyone knows what the sun looks like, even if you obviously don't try to spend a bunch of time looking at it. Bright, vaguely yellowish, depending on how much you're staring at it, and round. Right? Well, that used to be true. But about 4 years ago, something happened. And now, for want of a better term, the sun has its phases. A bit like the moon, but going down instead of sideways. And strangely lined, I suppose. And obviously, there are better journals about this. Other people talking about how weird it is. Scientists, magicians, and everything else claiming they'll figure out the answer to it. Now, I'm here to record some of the weirder effects that aren't strictly speaking related to the sun itself, but happened at roughly the same time and may or may not be caused by the sun now cycling through its stripes. So, here are the observations I have made over the last 4 years. When the sun looks normal, minus what I am assured are thin dotted lines across the sun, they represent each of the different stripes. The day and nights are normal. I am told that each stripe slowly dims until we have the night of the no sun, and each stripe lasts about 2 weeks each, give or take a few hours. Now then, when the sun is full and the days are normal, the only real way to describe what happens is life continues on. No animals act weird. It seems almost as if it was 5 years ago, and the sun was just a sun. An ordinary star in an ordinary star system. Now then, that once again lasts for about 2 weeks. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. Once the first stripe has worn off, things can get a bit curious. Nothing too strange, not yet at least. Animals sleep a little more. Nocturnal animals seem to act almost diurnal, which is active during both the day and the night. But of course, this isn't too uncommon. Sometimes things will scare the animals into acting during both periods. The air will feel, at least to me, a bit thick, a little heavier during this 2-week period. The uncomfortable reminder that for as much as we wish it to be, we are living under a weird star. Things are no longer normal. But outside of some thick air, some higher humidity, I am told, and a bit more rain, which is always pleasant for those that live in the deserts, nothing overly curious happens during this 2-week period when only the first stripe is gone. Things tend to get a bit more curious once the second stripe fades away. Fish seem to be walking on land using their lowest, I guess, belly part to crawl along as if they were a snake, or in the case of some larger ones that have a tail fin, they will not quite walk on them. Now then, I say they are walking on land despite crawling, and that is because of how they move. It seems, from my observations, that there are perhaps 4 different distinct muscle groups that are only present when there are 2 stripes missing from the sun. These 4 muscles act as feet, for want of a better term, allowing the fish to crawl along as some weird mix between a quadruped, like a lizard, or a particularly small cat, and 2 snakes uncomfortably close to each other. Having done some experiment cutting fish open during each of the different stripes, these muscle groups seem to always be present, but they're in a different form for each of the stripes. During the time when the first stripe is missing, the flesh unhooks, I suppose. And whatever happens to them during the second allows them to begin to move on land. Now then, this is one of the more curious things, but is not too terribly bad. Other animals, like dogs and cats, seem to prefer to sleep during this 2-week period. That is not to say they are unconscious or dead or unmovable or anything of the kind. Whereas your dog may get 7 to 10 hours of sleep on a normal day 5 years ago, during this 2-week period, your pets might sleep a full 20 hours. 4 hours are left over to split between eating a large meal, so do remember to feed them more during this 2 weeks. I would suggest simply adding to their bowl if they're on dry food, as if it was a normal day for them, because they will eat it all once they awaken. If you have any fish as a pet, I suppose you could let them out of the tank and let them explore or something. I don't know. I don't have any fish. I haven't tried this myself. Reptiles are perhaps slightly more curious in how they act. Where fish and other aquatic life seem to come out of the water, mammals like your dog and cat sleep more. Reptiles, I believe they are attempting to fly. A curious case, since there's a distinct lack of ability among 90 to 99% of reptiles to fly. But many of them will stand up as best they can on their 2 lowest legs, the 2 furthest back legs, I apologize. And they will begin beating their forward legs as if they were wings. We are unsure of why this is, but every reptile with limbs seems to do this. More or less constantly for the entire 2 weeks. Several of them will even peck at the ground like they're attempting to, when they're attempting to eat, like they're grabbing seeds or the like. Most of them don't seem to have any kind of real ability to stand up, so they just fall over and are flapping their front legs wildly. For this period, for me at least, These 2 weeks do not feel as heavy as the last two, but it doesn't quite feel like a normal week. The days for this 2 weeks seem to stretch on and on for us. As far as I'm aware, this only happens to humans because other animals, such as bees and some other insects which have the ability to perceive time, if not account it like we do, react as normal, while we humans seem to exclusively be feeling a bit like it's a slow day at work and the day is just dragging on for a full 2 weeks, which I suspect is why this is the one that most people dislike the most. Now, when the third of the 4 stripes disappears, or when things are at their most curious. Due to my relative positioning on the planet, we will spend very little time in the sunlight. And so this may be different for other researchers in different places across the globe. But from what I can observe, several mammals during this 2-week period seem to make up for lost time, I suppose. Sleeping only a total of 4 hours each day, in reverse of the previous set. Smaller mammals will spend their time running and playing a lot more. Despite the increase in energy, there seems to be no increase in their food intake. It seems to be decreased, but that, from what we can tell, is only primarily because the previous 2 weeks they were eating larger portions. So now as they return to their normal portions, it seems smaller. Fish, for this 2-week period, will spend their time jumping, I suppose. That's not quite what they're doing, not how I would classify it, at least. But they seem to be attempting to learn how to climb, I suppose. I am unsure of what is causing them to do this, but looking at their muscle groups, it may be they're attempting to make the muscles reattach themselves. How or why, I do not know. But 1 in every perhaps 1,000 fish, this is of course with a sample size of 10,000, so the numbers may be different for a different area, but one in every 1,000, one in every 1,000 or so will have managed to reconnect the muscles to where they are during when the sun is full. Now, I am not sure why they are reconnecting their muscles, since they still seem to be on land and are using them to move around. But those that do seem to reconnect their muscles begin to roll on their side to move instead of the crawling, walking hybrid that ones who do not seem to do. The fish do not seem to have any particular destination during the periods when they can walk as a note. They seem to just be wandering around. We had initially thought that they were moving towards perhaps a larger body of water, but during an experiment last year when we brought some from a small pond to a large lake, both with roughly the same salt and chemical contents, the fish briefly went into the water and then just came back out. As this 2 week ends, as this 2 weeks end, they will begin to move back towards whatever body of water they originally came from. But they do not re-enter the body of water even at the end of the 2 weeks. For myself and several other researchers, we all described this period as light and airy. Unfortunately, due to the way that the stripes work, we're unsure of whether or not this is because the last 2 periods felt vaguely sluggish and heavy, and so returning to normal feels lighter and better, or if the actual pressure on us is lighter. For the first time, well, no. For the only period that we have observed when 3 stripes are missing is when birds tend to act curious. With the exception of the hummingbird, all birds begin flying backwards. Hummingbirds, having the ability to fly backwards normally, appear to be moving exclusively sideways. We are unsure of how the birds are navigating when flying backwards, but every bird that has flight capabilities that we have seen will fly exclusively backwards during this 2 week period. Several flightless birds, like the penguin, kiwi, and ostrich, appear to be swapping primary movement methods. kiwis, which use a short but fast dashing method through brush and other such plant-based debris, are sliding or attempting to slide, often being on dry ground, but they will attempt to slide on their stomach, much as you might see a penguin do in its ice. Ostriches and other such large flightless birds are adopting the method of the kiwi and are trying, fairly desperately actually, to hide underneath brush and plants as if they were small and hiding from prey, or predators rather. I apologize. We are not 100% sure what they might be trying to hide from, or if this is just a result of the movement transfer, I suppose. But they are noticeably more slow when doing this, going for less sustained runs than they are normally and previously shown to do so. And penguins, predictably, are attempting to copy the ostrich's method of running, which can look fairly comical when you take into account their little legs and inability to separate their legs very far. Now then, an ostrich's top speed can exceed 40 miles an hour. During this roughly 2-week period, the penguins will achieve perhaps 10 miles an hour using their little waddling run. Strangely enough, it seems only the movement is transferred over, though. None of the three that I have mentioned change in their eating, sleeping, or hunting methods. The penguins, when underwater, will swim the same as they always have. Ostriches will still claw and attack, and the kiwis will still hide when faced with something that hunts them. And finally, for the reptiles, during this period, when 3 stripes are missing from our sun, there is there seems to be very little change from 2 stripes, except now several of them appear to be standing better during their attempts to fly. A few forms of gecko with a decent climbing ability have even shown a remarkable ability at standing on 2 legs without using their tails to prop them up. We are unsure if this is caused by the sun losing its stripe, or simply because they've had 2 weeks of practice, but it is still noticeable that across the board, all quadruped lizards are much closer to being able to walk bipedal. And finally, for the 2 weeks of darkness, or when there were 0 stripes in the sun, we have much fewer observations because we were only operating on starlight. And what artificial light we have. The artificial light allows us to do okay laboratory tests, but it is much harder to get natural information. Birds now exclusively walk on land, while our flightless trio, as previously mentioned, are now back to their traditional movement methods, but appear more aggressive than usual. With penguins attempting to fight off seals that they would normally run from, and ostriches, normally plenty aggressive, are now smashing through small walls or unreinforced buildings. Smaller mammals like dogs and cats appear to be acting relatively normal during this 2-week period. Of course, this is really only the domesticated ones that we have observed. For some of the wilder ones, we are not able to observe them as well, but they also seem to be acting within expected behavioral patterns, with perhaps 1 or 2 curious things left over. Some seem to sleep more, some are more active, but most seem to just function as if the sun was full, despite there being little to no light. Birds, and most insects, in fact, during this period, are acting as if it is a single night and appear to be sleeping for the full 2 weeks. This is, of course, excluding the nocturnal ones, which seem to also be treating this as one longer night. The diurnal ones appear to be functioning as if what we can tell as day and night when the sun is full are reversed. The fish at this point are returning back to their original bodies of water. Those that are still walking and crawling are hopping just outside of it, so that we must assume the muscles will reattach as they jump in the water. Their success rate rises from 1 in 1,000 to approximately 1 in 10. During this period, for humans, for the most part, myself and my team have all recorded this period with individually unique experiences. I myself felt more energized and in a better mood, while a couple of my coworkers have felt more tired and more sluggish, not as if the sun was missing its two stripes, but more as if they had missed out on a night of good sleep. Lizards are, for the most part, stopped attempting to fly and have begun to seemingly dig small holes for themselves. But they will stop if the light is shined on them, so it is a bit more difficult to fully see this effect on them. At the end of this 2 weeks, there is approximately 24 hours, give or take a few minutes, that were lost in transition between the other ones, where the stripes refill themselves, I suppose. I'm sure there's some other name for it with different scientific terms, but it looks as if vertical lines of light are filling back up the sun. No one has any information on what causes this, and during this roughly day-long period, all animals act as if it were a normal day 5 years ago. Lizards popping out of their holes, fish who did not quite make it back into the water, hopping around like they're dying, birds nesting and eating as normal. The exception to this, of course, being us, humans. During this one rough day, every single person I have spoken to has reported a vague off feeling about this one day. Every single cycle, I've had a different person go, something feels off about today, when asked to describe their experiences. Now then, all these things aren't definitive proof of anything, due to the fact that we have not been able to examine anything for longer than 4 years, and we are not able to examine all of them at once, only being able to do so in individual batches. As we gather more information, I will continue to publish these journals in the hopes of giving y'all as much information in the future as possible. But thank you for listening, if anyone's even been listening.